Welcome to Gut Punch, the podcast that explores life-changing moments. Hosted by Kathryn Lancioni, a seasoned educator with personal insights into resilience. Kathryn shares how life can change in an instant, shaping our path forward. Each episode features inspiring guests who face their own gut punch moments. Guests share their journeys through loss, upheaval, and triumph. What to expect: honest conversations, lessons in resilience, inspiration for growth. Join Kathryn as she highlights courage and perseverance in every story. Gut Punch is a reminder that there is always a path forward. Be part of the conversation. Register now to join Kathryn for today's journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Gut Punch. My name is Kathryn Lancioni, and I'm your host for this week's episode. Today, I am delighted to have joined me Jeff Tan. Jeff is a fellow with me with the Institute for Digital Transformation, a friend and a survivor of, unfortunately, multiple gut punches. So today, we're going to talk about some of the crazy life experiences that Jeff has navigated and how he's gotten through them. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to our conversation after helping you launch this podcast.
That's right. If you all remember, Jeff was technically the host of shows 1 through 3, where we talked about the gut punch that I had been through and how I had gotten through that. And today, Jeff is going to be kind enough to share his experiences. So Jeff, let's start from the beginning. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and a little bit about your background, that would be great.
Absolutely. I spent it's hard to believe, a 45-year career in information technology, going way back to COBOL and yes, punch cards. That's how old I freaking
I remember those days.
And about the second half of my career, I went into management and leadership, and had served a wide variety of organizations. Through that was CIO for a couple of organizations here in Indianapolis, where I'm from. And then I switched and went to the dark side, as I joke and say. I joined a vendor company and became a technology vendor for a small company by the name of Blue Lock. Worked with them through an acquisition in 2018, stayed there for another couple of years after that acquisition. And then I launched what is essentially what I'm doing today, which is Ton Enterprises. I was real creative when I came up with my company, which is author and speaker and leadership coach. I'm focused on leadership development, that next generation of leaders.
It's great, Jeff. Thanks for that. Yes, and leadership these days is such an important topic. And I think the concept of resilience, which ties into gut punches, is a big thing for many, many leaders. So let's jump right into it, because I think your story is extraordinary, which is kind of an understatement. So talk to me about what this gut punch was and what was involved.
Well, in a way, it's my mom's story, but it was a gut punch to me as her child. So we're going to go way back to 1980. My mom was almost killed in a fire. Very, very dramatic fire.
At your family home, or where was the fire?
At her office, which was actually in a church building. My mom was an accountant for a nonprofit here in Indianapolis, and their offices were in a church building, and she got trapped inside by the fire and had to go out the second floor window. And she hung on to the window ledge for as long as she could stand it, and then dropped into the alleyway. She was not expected to live. She had third-degree burns over 65% of her body, from the top of her head down to about her hips. And the only thing on her upper body that was not burned was where her bra was, believe it or not. That protected. But I can remember I was 22 years old. I was working for Indiana National Bank here in Indianapolis, and I get this phone call, and the voice on the other end sounded kind of like my dad, but not really. And in fact, beyond Jeff, that was about all he could get out. And then all of a sudden, one of the people that worked for him got on the phone and said, there's been a horrible accident. Your mom's been in a fire. You need to come to Wishart Hospital right now. And life changed.
What was that when you got that phone call? What was that feeling like?
It was well, shock, first of all, but it was also, you don't know what's wrong. Right? Yeah. Because they had not seen mom yet. They knew that she was burned. They didn't know how badly. They knew that she was in the emergency room at this city hospital. And so there was a lot of unknowns. I mean,
Right.
we just didn't know what we were going to be facing.
And so you get to the hospital, they evaluate her, and they don't think she's going to make it. Is that
Yeah.
basically what you were told?
The family gathered over the it was several hours before we could see her, and several hours before we even really got talked to by the doctors. So one by one, kind of the family was gathering in the waiting room at the hospital. I was local. My older brother was local. I'm trying to remember back that
Right.
far. My sister lived in Evansville. My younger brother, I forget where he lived at the time, maybe Florida. So little by little, everybody's coming in, and finally, one of the doctors comes in and talks to us and really says, the next few hours are
Critical.
touch and go. I tell you, one of the most gripping things, Kathryn, was when they said that we could go see her. We had to put on gowns and masks and all that because a burn unit it has to be a clear environment, right?
Yeah.
And so we're getting all suited up, and then my dad and I were walking down the hall, and he grabs me by the arm and says, "She can't die. She doesn't know I love her."
Oh my God. How did that make you feel
It's
when he
like,
said
oh
that?
my God, right? And I kind of looked at him and I said, "Dad, she does. She does." And we walk into this room, and by this point, my mom was intubated, so couldn't really talk to us much. She kind of knew we were there, but looked nothing like the woman that we knew. And for the audience and the listeners, when you're burned that severely, you begin to swell. And so that's why they intubated her, because her throat had been burned. And so they have to protect from the airwave closing off. But then her arms and the rest of her body was starting to swell as well. And just, I don't know, there was a cartoon show back in the day called the Fantastic Four,
Yes.
and there was a character in that called the Thing. That was what my mom looked like.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah,
So she was how long, and I've never known anyone that's been burned that severely, but I can only imagine what it must have been like for her to have gone from who she was to being a victim of this
yeah.
terrible, terrible, terrible experience. What did like when she realized what had happened, what did she say?
Well, she couldn't talk for a long time. My sister and her actually figured out a way through touch to communicate, which was kind of interesting. And she talks about it in her book. I'm drawing a blank exactly on their code that they used, but they worked out a way to communicate, I think, by touching her foot, because that was
Okay.
about the only place you could touch. And what happens when you're in a tragedy like that is you don't remember right away. Your brain kind of protects you from
Yes.
those, but little by little she was remembering. But what she wanted to communicate most of all to each one of us individually was her love. And again, we don't know if she's living or dying
Right.
at this point. I think it was on a I want to say it was on a Friday
Okay.
when the fire happened. It was January 4th, 1980, and it was I can't remember how long before she could actually talk, before they took the tube out. But she was in the hospital until Easter. So she was in the hospital for months.
Yeah.
And the book that I mentioned, The Flame Shall Not Consume You, my mom was a minister's wife, and attractive 40 some odd year old woman at the time of this,
Wow.
very active in the church, and her identity was gone,
Yes. Because
right?
when she
Because
looked in the mirror, she was who?
she doesn't recognize herself,
Yes.
right? And it was just this book. I tell you, if you really want an experience, listen to the audiobook version of The Flame Shall Not Consume You. It's a tearjerker, just what she was going through. Not to mention the family, right? We're all knocked for a mile. Again, I was 22 years old. I had a 2-year-old son who didn't recognize his grandmother all of a sudden and was kind of afraid of her a little bit,
Yeah.
which broke her heart the first time that happened. But they became buds again over time. But it was just each one of us. So there's 4 kids. Each one of us, I think, were impacted in different ways and went about life in different ways after that.
So for yourself, how were you impacted? How do you think it changed you? Because you're 22 years old, you're a young parent. You probably relied on your mom, I would think a little bit as far as
Oh
it
yeah.
into
Yeah.
your son. And then suddenly she's laying completely helpless in a hospital bed, can't
Oh.
talk, is going, as you know, is going to have huge emotional problems. So what was all that like for you?
It was, I tell you, I'll answer that kind of over the span of time. Uh, One of the first memories I have would have been Sunday morning. So again, my mom was a minister's wife. My dad was a minister. I grew up going to church 3 or 4 times a week.
Yep.
Right. So it was ingrained in us. And I called a youth pastor that I knew that lived in a different town. He and I were very close. He was kind of like almost a second father to me. And I can remember saying to him, Ivan, I don't know if I should pray for her to live or to die. I don't know which would be better.
And that's a terrible, let me just interject here. That's a terrible thought to have.
Yes. Yes.
But because you feel guilty, but then you also are like, well, but it might be better for them. It's a terrible position to be in, and we're all in that at some point.
Yes, and burns are intense in a different kind of way. When, especially with third degree burns, the burns are deep enough that you don't feel pain because you don't
Wow.
have that skin there. The skin's gone. The nerve endings are gone. The pain starts as you start to heal. So I would go, I worked downtown and the hospital was downtown. So I would go over on my lunch hour almost every day just to be with her.
Yeah.
There were many, many times that I couldn't even see her because they were working on her. They were doing some things and it was just the timing. But I always wanted the nurses to say that I was here, that she
Yeah.
knew. Those were some long lunch hours, and I don't mean longer than an hour. I mean just long time where you're going. This hospital was an old city hospital, and to get to her room, you go through these mazes of hallways and such, and oh, those walks were long walks. I tell you that longer term, what it did for me was I went on. I guess the best thing, this way to describe it, is a spiritual journey.
Okay.
Started questioning the way belief system that I had grown up with and had accepted, and it completely changed that for me. It took a long time. Mom, this was 1980. She survived, for those that are hanging on edge. She did survive this. And in fact, as a testament to her power, she went back to work in the burn unit.
Wow.
She became a doctor-patient liaison. Who better to explain to burn victims what's happening to them than somebody that had been through it? So I don't know how she ever did that. But she lived until 2013. Ironically, the cause of death was COPD from her burned lungs. She never fully healed from all that. And so it took a long time, but the fire finally won there in the end. It just was life-changing for all of us. I wrote her eulogy when she passed in 2013, and I titled it Mary Ellen Tunn, the Woman with Two Dashes, because the woman that raised me, my mother, died in that fire in 1980.
Okay.
She was a completely different person for the next 33 years or whatever the math.
Jeff, how did it change her?
Well, she was more accepting of things around her, of people, of
Yeah.
places. She was always very accepting of people. So here's a story I'll tell on my brother. My brother was going camping with his girlfriend.
Right.
Okay, and he's telling mom that they're going camping, and this is after the fire, and she looks at him and says, "Well, Joel, are you having separate tents?" And first of all, she never would have joked about that before. And before, it would have been, yes, I'm in separate tents.
Right.
But he was just like flabbergasted, right, that she's asking this question. And
That's
it was
awesome.
that kind of thing, right? Just open to newer ideas. In fact, as I mentioned, my spiritual journey, she kind of went on a spiritual journey as well. Her relationship, I described the book as her wrestling match with God. Your first reaction is, why me? Why'd you do this to me? Blah, 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 that kind of thing. And she kind of works through that. But in addition, she opened her eyes to other beliefs, or at least expanded beliefs. John Shelby Spong was her favorite author, and she turned me on to him. He was an Episcopalian priest who wrote things like Resurrection, Truth or Myth,
Okay.
just looking at
Yes.
fundamental belief systems of Christianity. So she and I kind of went on that journey together for a while. I went much farther than she did, but she was always open to that. So
So she was more accepting.
yeah,
Was she more laid back?
yeah, I would say, especially in, it took uh, the recovery was
Yeah, so I wanted to
years,
ask you about that.
right?
So what was her like, did she have skin grafts? I mean, what was the recovery?
Yes, and so part of what happens when you have these burns, I mentioned the swelling, so they do episiotomies to relieve the tension on
Yeah.
this. So she had cuts down her arms where they release that stress on the skin. She had skin graft after skin graft, sometimes with her own skin, sometimes with pig skin. And the way that my family and her especially deal with crisis is through humor. So she used to say she was a football because she had pigskin on her. The pig was brown and white. So she had these splotches, right? She used to call herself the crispy critter, but that's the lighter side. The darker side is she tried to kill herself twice.
Was it years after or was it
It
immediately?
was months after, as she's scarring and scabbing and things like that. My dad finally works up the courage to go back to work, and mom writes about this in the book, that she was going to go out to the garage and turn the car on and just end it all. And the only thing that saved her was she couldn't turn the key in the ignition. Her hands were so burned that she couldn't turn the key.
Isn't that ironic?
And you know, she had pins in all her fingers because there was no muscle there. She'd hung on to
Yeah.
the windowsill for so long. There was no muscle tendon left in her hands. So they had her pinned in ways that she could at least do some things, right? And I'm going to fast forward again just to show the resilience of this woman, just incredible. This would probably have been 2008, so she's 70 something by then. And I had stopped going to church. That was part of my journey. And she always busted my chops over not going to church. And I said, but my church is on a river. I was into canoeing and
Yeah.
the outdoors, and that's where my cathedral was. And so I invited my mom to go to my church.
Okay.
And I took her on a 10-mile canoe trip. And I said, Mom, you don't have to paddle. You don't. You can just sit there. I just want you to enjoy this. That woman with those disfigured hands and could barely move her arms because her skin just never gave her the freedom again. She paddled for 10 miles, Kathryn.
Wow. That's incredible.
It was like unbelievable. What an amazing experience to see that resilience.
It must
But
have been
she
so
dealt with it the
incredible.
rest of her life. You can't be that disfigured and not deal with it.
No, I mean, and so for you, how has her experience shaped you? Because, you said she became more accepting, she became
Yeah.
more laid back. I mean, I know from my own, my own journey, which is, I'm only a year out from it being done, is everything to me is it's easier to put things into perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so little that actually matters. And I think we get caught up in society in all these little things, all the nitty gritty. And really the nitty gritty is just window dressing. It's, as I said to someone the other day, I think it was on one of these conversations, it was like, it's the people that give birth to you and the people that you give birth to that at the end of the day are the ones that matter most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did her gut punch help you as you've evolved over
Yeah.
time?
Well, it definitely shaped me. It shaped my spirituality, I'll call it that,
Yep.
dramatically as I really began to explore what that meant to me. It helps you notice people that are going through tragedy. Sometimes you see things, and sometimes a lot of people don't, or they ignore it. Some people's scars are not visible.
That's right.
Right? They're internal scars. So you take that to heart. definitely shaped me in those ways, that seeing people, caring about people, being resilient. I mean, holy crap, what a great example of resilience. Because, a lot of people would see mom through the years and not see the internal struggle.
Yes. Yes.
As family, we would see it even up to the very end. We would see the down days, and she and I were best buds, and so she shared deeply about what she was thinking and feeling and going through. And that helped. I went from 22 years old till now I'm 67. Now I'm an old man.
No, you're not.
And it's probably the single most impactful event in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I've been through a lot.
Yes.
And maybe I'll change that in another episode. I may say something different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it definitely shaped my years from 22 to 50. Call it.
Well, and I think that when a close family member goes through an experience like this, everyone is affected, whether they like it or not. And I know from my own, journey that I've been going through, like family members and friends were affected in ways that they realize and that they don't realize yet. And I think that I know for me, like one of the things that I've, I think changes, as I said earlier, like I've just become a lot more laid back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
You don't sweat the small stuff, right? Yeah. Right. I mean,
as I say, I fought the hardest battle anyone should ever have to fight, and I made it.
Yeah.
And so the little stuff to me is just,
Yep.
But I think for my kids, for my sister, for my husband, my parents, who all saw me, at my lowest point, that affects what you think of someone and how you view them. For you, how did it impact the way you viewed your mom, seeing what she went through?
I have looked at her for years, and there is no way I could do what she did. I look at her in awe that she was able to fight back from that, to walk through and come out the other side. And while there was really never the final other side, she was able to make things of that tragedy, right? She wrote a book. She went on speaking tours. I still hear from this day. So when I published my first book in 2018, that got my name out there.
Yes.
What started to happen was people were finding me and would send me a note saying, "Hey, are you Mary Ellen Tunn's son? Or are you related to Mary Ellen Tunn? I read her book. It changed my life." Da 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 da. And so I probably hear from people, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times a year that
That's amazing.
they found her book.
Yeah.
And that led to so this woman contacted me. She was from Peru.
Okay.
And she remembered the book from when she was growing up. Her parents had the book. And she reached out to me, and her basic question was, is it available in digital form? It's like, well, no, they didn't have digital in 1980, right? And I said, but what a great idea. So I reached out to the original publisher and got the rights released to me. And I published an ebook version of it, first of all. So it's out on Kindle.
Yeah.
And then I published an audiobook of it. And what I will try to describe that, because that was reliving the gut punch.
Are you the voice on the audiobook?
No. I wanted a female, and I wanted a female that was in her mid 40s, like my mom was when the fire. So I reached out to Amy Brown. Amy is the CEO of Authentics, an AI healthcare company here in Indianapolis. I have known Amy since she was, I don't know, 14. She grew up in the church that my parents went to and I went to for a while. She knew my mom. She knew my dad. So I reached out to her and said, "Amy, would you do this?" I dramatically underestimated the amount of time it was going to take, but she and I shared this experience of being in the recording studio, recording this book. I could not, the way the recording studio was set up is I could not see Amy. She was in the sound booth. I was looking at the back of the recording engineer who had a window where he could see her, but I could not see her. And what happened very quickly is I was listening to my mom tell the story.
Wow.
because this female voice and the pattern. And I tell you, we had, I don't know, call it 7 or 8, 9 recording sessions. I think both of us cried every time. I think Mitch, the recording engineer, probably cried a little bit too, as we were going through this. And I'm going to go off camera for a second because I have to show you something, because this is part of the story. Is you don't have, I know,
Exactly.
but that's part of the tension. So we were almost done. In fact, I think we were doing the last section.
Okay.
And Amy came in with gifts for Mitch and I, the recording engineer, and myself. And it's a rock that looks like a flame.
It does. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
And she has one herself.
Okay.
Mitch is now sitting on the counter at the recording studio, and this sits over here on the other side of my office. But it was such a deep experience for her and I to go through this, because like I said, she knew my mom, and she was a young mother. She had kids, she still has kids, and to kind of live that story, going through that. And there's some humorous parts in the book that mom and dad are trying to figure out their physical relationship. Let's put it that way. And I had forgotten that part was really in the book. And Amy starts path, right? And it's like, oh my God, here's this woman that I've known since she was 14, and she's going to be talking about my mom and dad having sex. So
That's hilarious.
we laughed about that, but
Yeah.
I tell you, I wrote a series of blog posts for my blog Rivers of Thought on that process of going through that with Amy. And it was cathartic in a way to kind of relive that. There was lots of it that I had forgotten. I had forgotten what an incredible writer my mom is. I aspire to be a tenth as good as she is at telling a story and making you feel like you're there. She did an incredible job. I will warn the audience out there that if you find a print copy, they're hard to find these days. The print copy has in the center, I forget what they call that part of the book, has a series of pictures that show the before, the during, and the after, and some pretty incredible pictures.
Very impactful, needless to say.
Yeah.
So Jeff, that's the story of your mom.
Yeah.
And just the whole story, the effects, the gut punch, and but that's not the only thing that you've navigated.
Like a lot of people.
Right. The analogy I've been using, and John has heard this way too many times now, it's like we're standing by the ocean and the waves come up and some hit you at your ankles and some hit you at your feet and some knock you over.
Yeah.
And I know for me, there are some days where I am just like, where is the low tide? It's right. Some days it's a little too much.
Yeah.
But I also know that gut punch is a whole nother episode.
Yes.
And one that you're working through right now, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. And I can give a little bit of a snippet there, but it's absolutely one that is in process.
Yeah.
So, in August of 2023, my wife and I were sitting at the Cleveland Clinic. She was being examined because she had some balance issues, and we had visited several neurologists. Someone recommended that she go to Cleveland Clinic because no one could identify what was going on. And this neurologist, just a wonderful, wonderful guy, Dr. looks at some of her imaging and says to her, "Your cerebellum impresses me." And we both looked at him and said, "I don't think we want her cerebellum impressing you." She was diagnosed with a very rare neurological disease it's terminal. It was a gut punch. This one is a gut punch that keeps on giving because it's over time, right? And you don't know from one day to the next what's going to be the next gut punch. And so we are dealing with that right now in real time.
Yes.
So happy to come back on another episode and talk through that, because it is a little bit different than a single gut punch. And I don't know if you have a gut punch, if there's ever really just a single one. But, I look at mom, and mom had the fire, right? There was that event. This is something that like I say, almost every day it's something new.
Well, yes, your mother's experience was similar to mine in that it was a singular, unpredicted event that
Yeah.
happened that wreaked absolute havoc. And then that's your low, and you build up from that. What your wife is going through and what you're going through with her is different because there's a point of diagnosis. And then unfortunately, there's deterioration after that. And every day is different. And what your mom and I went through, every day is different, but hopefully every day is a little bit better.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the converse with what you're going through now.
Yeah. Yeah. We've learned a lot,
Yeah, that's important.
and she's seeing a therapist, and part of what you go through, it's called anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
You're grieving what's coming in a lot of ways. You're grieving each day what you lose, but then you also know what's down the road.
Yes. Well, I would love to have you back on to share the experience with us when you're ready to share it with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be
But
glad to.
I appreciate today. Thank you for the story. Thank you for the lessons learned. And I think it's inspiring, and it's a horrific story, but it's a family you came through it, and that's the important thing. And so many people have been blessed by her story, and I think that's so important. So the name of the book, you said it's an audiobook now and an ebook.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. In fact, I joke all the time that, my mom's book has sold much better than mine. She made the bestseller list. And so it's called The Flame Shall Not Consume You by Mary Ellen Tunn. It's a quote from Isaiah, and it's available on Kindle, and it's available on Audible.
Okay. Jeff, thank you. Appreciate the time. Wonderful to have you as a guest.
My pleasure.
And thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Gut Punch. We look forward to chatting with you again soon. Take care.
That's it for today's episode of Gut Punch. I hope you found inspiration, because no matter how hard life hits, there's always a way forward. Make sure to follow or subscribe to Gut Punch on your favorite podcast platform. If you know someone who could use a little inspiration, share this episode with them. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay strong. See you in the next episode.